All right, let's talk about the seat blank. This is the blank I'm using. This is the last of 8 for this set of chairs. It's 1 inch thick, red oak. The dimensions of the seat blank is from the back of the chair to the front of the chair, and the top here represents the front of the chair. That's 18 inches, and across the width of the chair, it is 18.5 inches. This particular chair blank, I decided to run the grain this way, in other words, across the chair rather than this way. It really doesn't make any difference from the perspective of the jig, and it's kind of a design decision depending on what you choose and the mechanics of the chair you're building. The other part of the first part of the jig I'm going to talk to you about is something called the follower. And this is the follower. This is the front of the seat that I'm showing you. This is the back. This is the front. And this is an inch thick piece of poplar that's a little over 8 inches long. And I drew a center line all around this piece of poplar. And I used that center line. I've got a couple of pocket hole screws buried in here. I used a Forstner bit to dig a hole. And so there's a little bit of wood back down on this end of it. And there's just about 1/4 of an inch of the screw sticking out that's actually burying itself into the chair blank. I drew a center line on the chair blank, and I carried it down to the front. I hope you can see that on the video. And then I carefully fastened this follower onto the chair blank. And okay, so here's the jig mounted on the table saw, and a couple of things I'll point out about the jig. There's a piece of melamine that I've sized to fit on the top of my Powermatic 66. That's set on the top of the saw, and there's a small kerf cut in the top of the material so that the saw blade can protrude. The idea is you're going to be having this thing stick up about 1/4 of an inch over the surface of the melamine, and that's going to be the thing that's going to actually carve the wood out of the chair blank. The thing that's different about my jig from Mario's jig is instead of having, in Mario's jig he showed some pegs and a board that you lift and move and lift and move. I decided to use these tracks, and I have a number of adjustments that I can make to this. So first of all, there's a starting point and a stopping point on both sides of the saw, and this essentially is going to determine the ultimate width of 1/2 of the chair blank. And so as you progress and move this fence, that's part of this thing, along this track, you're going to be essentially moving the blank further and further away from the saw blade and carving a bigger and bigger amount of material out. So there's a starting point and a stopping point. So to make all the chairs identical, once I get everything established, well, then it's a pretty easy matter of setting these things up, tightening them down, and then as I go from one end to the other and move the blank and progress through it, it's going to stop it over here, and we're going to have identical chairs. So you position the blank on top of the jig, like so, and these stops are designed to allow you to move the work through the saw blade to a particular point, and this again was adjustable as well because I wanted to be able to make a very precise adjustment so that I would get this thing stopping at exactly the right point, so that it now is in front of this little notch here. I think you can see this notch here. This notch is the pivot point, and the back of the front and back of the follower is rounded. So as I'm moving across the table saw and I come to this point, I can now rotate the blank through, and using this little point as a point of rotation, like so, flip the stop out of the way, and then make the rest of the cut. And so that's the basic theory. These are adjustable. There's a stop on both sides, and you can go in either direction. So as after I've gone that way, I can put this stop down and flip it, and then rotate it this way. The other part of this that's a little bit tricky to get used to is you need to be able to keep this rounded part centered in this V, because that's your radius essentially of the part you're carving out on the front, the top of the seat blank. So as you move your work through and you come to the stop, what you want to make sure you're doing is you're always keeping pressure over here, so you're forcing this radius into the notch so that it will, got this going the wrong way, goes like this, so that it's going to rotate around like so. So it's a little bit of hand training, so you kind of get the feel for it. In other words, what you don't want to have happen is something like that where it slips out. That would not be very good. You want this to be buried in this notch as you're rotating, so that you're keeping pressure this way, keeping it into the notch. And as you emerge on the other side, you have to be careful and kind of let up on the pressure and start rotating against one side or the other of the notch, because you're actually leaving the notch, and try to keep it more or less equal. Now, if you make a little jiggle like that, it doesn't seem to really hurt anything, because you're going to be removing more and more and more material as you progress through this. So even if you mess it up a little bit, the next pass is going to take away whatever you've messed up. Alright, so here's another view of this, and you can see that here's where the saw blade is going to emerge. And if you look carefully, you'll see here's the center line of the seat, and it's going to be cutting the radius of the saw blade up to about 1/4 inch. I have a little piece of bar stock here that's exactly 1/4 inch, and ultimately I'm going to have the saw blade 1/4 inch. And what that's going to do is that's going to cut a curve on this side and a curve on this side, and it's going to meet in the middle and form the pommel. You want to sneak up on this first cut. You don't want to cut out a huge amount of material immediately, because you're putting tremendous stress on the saw blade in a direction that the saw blade was never designed to take that stress. So I found that a regular curve 60 tooth plywood blade with carbide tips seem to work pretty well. But you definitely want to go slow. So I'm going to make the first cut, and you're going to be able to watch this and see how this works. So I've got the saw position. I'm going to raise my blade up, so it's maybe sticking up about 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so that's a little bit, sticking up about 1/16 of an inch. Now I'm going to make the first pass. I'm going to put this stop down, fire up the saw. One other thing I should tell you is there's a piece of wood attached back over here in the back of the fence, and this will be in the plans as well. The reason for this piece of wood is it's a safety device, because as you move this fence forward further and further and further, you're actually exposing that saw blade to your hand. So after I did a couple of blanks, I decided I needed to add this as a safety thing. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to cut the first pass. I'm pushing into the V as I'm making the turn. Flip the stock back. Okay, so let's take this out, and you'll see what it's done is it's actually starting to cut a little trough in here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually raise the blade up higher and higher until I get essentially a point over here. That'll be when the blade will be protruding about 1/4 inch up off the melamine surface. We should end up with a point. So I'll do that a few more times, keeping the trash off of the top is kind of a thing you have to do. All right. So I'll do a couple more of these, and we'll come back when I've got the point just about formed. So I'll raise this. now we're in the little V. A little bit more to go. Okay, so now, as I clean off the junk, you can see that I formed a nice pommel right down the center of the seat. So that's the first step, getting that saw blade height correct. Now that the saw blade height is correct, I'm going to start advancing the fence and essentially moving out further and further towards the edge and increasing the radius of this curve as I move along, and you'll see that, how that works. So I took the time to draw 1/4 inch gradients along this fence here. So each time I adjust the fence and move it forward, I'm going to move it about 1/4 inch on each side at a time and then make another pass. These marks are on both sides of the jig, so I can keep the fence pretty much in correct alignment. All right. Here we go. Now I'm going to start to move the jig 1/4 inch forward on each side. So there's the left side. There's the right side. Turn this on and make another pass. Actually moving this blank while the blade is still running, but in order to save a little bit of time on the video, I thought I'd show you what's going on here. So as we're moving the fence further and further towards the front, we're actually making everything wider, including a bigger radius here. So I'm going to stop the tape right now, and I'm going to go ahead and get this almost to the end, and then we'll take it up again from there. This last 1/4 inch, I'm going to divide it in half so that I'm making a finer cut. Maybe a little less sanding over here required. Try to get this last one as accurate as possible, because each successive pass has cleaned up any mistakes you might have made in the previous pass. So I'm going to try to be as careful as I can and make as perfect a circle as I can with the jig. there you have it. Carved out seat. Beginning to end, it took me about 12 minutes to carve this out. So there's a lot of work building the jig, but once you get it built, you can crank out these seats very quickly and end up having a nice little production system for yourself. So off of the saw blade, there's a couple of things you're going to have to do to clean this up and make it so it's perfectly smooth. I hope you can see this on the video, but the saw blade will leave little kerf marks. You can see right there. As you cut the material out, it's pretty much unavoidable that you're going to be left with these little kerf marks, so those have to go away. The other problem is that the pommel that's left is way too long. This pommel is probably about 9 inches long, which essentially is the length of the follower, so we want to cut that back to something more on the order of about 5 inches or so. So I'm going to show you how I do this, and you'll see it's very simple. Okay, so I've got the seat blank secured to my assembly table, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pencil mark on this lengthy pommel, and I'm going to knock it down to about 5 inches or so. So all it takes is a little pencil mark right there. And when you're carving out chair seats, most of the work, the vast majority of the work is done for us on the table saw. But you will have to do some cleanup, a little bit of sculpting, nowhere near as much as you'd have to do if you were doing it completely by carving, but you will have to do a little bit of work. I happen to have a Festool Rotex number 125 machine that is hooked up to a dust collection system. It's extremely effective. I've got some 80 grit paper on here. This machine has two modes of operation. In one mode, it's basically a normal palm sander, and in the other mode, it's called the Rotex mode, it becomes an extremely aggressive machine capable of removing vast amounts of material very quickly. So I'm going to start off with the machine in the Rotex position, and that causes the bottom, the sandpaper to move around in a much more aggressive pattern, and you'll kind of see how quickly I'm going to be able to remove most of this, if not all of this material behind this mark I made. So here we go. Okay, so I don't know if you had your stopwatch out, but that was very quick. I'd say it was probably a minute, minute and a half, and I've removed all that material. Pretty amazing machine. If you do any kind of work at all that requires a lot of sanding, sooner or later, if you haven't found these Festool products yet, you will. These are great machines. So now I'm going to take it out of the aggressive mode, put it more into the normal palm sander mode. Although before I do that, I'm going to take a look, and I can see there's still a little bit of unevenness, slight, maybe my hands were jiggling a little bit as I was moving it through the fixture or something, but I can see a little bit of issue right over here. You may not be able to see it on the video, but and then right over here. So I want to equalize these surfaces, and while I still have the machine in the Rotex mode, I'm just going to quickly go over that and kind of flatten out this whole material right over here. So there, I've essentially got it pretty well flattened out, And now all I have left to deal with is the saw kerf marks that kind of go around this edge over here. Now this machine has got a fairly soft compressible pad that the sandpaper is affixed to, and so that's kind of important as you're trying to get up these curves. This thing's going to actually conform to that curve, and it's going to do a very nice job of sweeping around this curve and actually removing these saw curves. So I'm going to kind of start at this end and take my time and go around this end, and I don't know how much of this I'm going to actually show you because you're probably have better things to do than to watch me sand, but you'll get the basic idea. I'm taking it out of the Rotex mode and putting it into the normal sanding mode, and here I go. Yeah, so that's very nice. Now it's got a nice smooth finish to it. So total time from carving the seat out, about 11 or 12 minutes on the table saw, to doing the sanding and getting it ready to go. I'd say I probably spent 7 or 8 minutes on sanding this, maybe a little bit longer. Let's say a half an hour per chair seat total time. I would eventually work through all the grits. I started off with 80 grit to get rid of all the saw kerf marks and to smooth it out and to remove a lot of the extra pommel material, and I went to 100 grit, and then I'm going to go over with 120 and probably 180, and I'll probably stop there for this because it's oak and it's you don't necessarily need to take it too much further than that, but yeah, that's the basic idea.